Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Seth Joyner Show. Got another good one for you. As the fiscal year crawls up upon us, March 17th starts the new NFL year, starts free agency, a lot going on. Dak Prescott breaks the bank. The free agency period is upon us with the salary cap being minimized because of COVID. We got some guys that are probably going to hit the market. These next couple of weeks are going to be interesting. Today ends the franchise period, and really there wasn't a whole lot of guys that got franchised. I mean, out of 32 teams, only 9 teams exercised their franchise designation and transition designation throughout the transition and franchise period, which is shocking, but maybe not so much when you consider that the salary cap is going backwards, so to speak. I got a feeling that the people who know how to manipulate the cap, they're not going to hurt as much. But those who are in dire straits are going to have some issues. The Eagles still, after all the moves that they've made, they still find themselves minus $34 million on the cap. Great show for you today. I got 2 guests that, many of you, especially if you're Eagles fans, are really, really familiar with. I want to bring in my good friend, my fellow Eagle. He is the co-host of the Marks and Reese show on WIP, Mr. Ike Reese. Ike, how you doing, my brother?
I'm good, Hammer. What's happening with you, man? Thanks for having me again. I enjoy it.
You got it, man. You got it. I got to bring you on every once in a while, I got to get you to serve my people some Ike juice, and we got to talk about that LTBB today.
Looking forward.
My next guest is an Eagles beat writer for WIP and NewJersey.com or NJ.com. Let me get it right. Got his finger on the pulse of what's going on around the Eagles all season long. Mr. Elliot Shore-Parks. Elliot, how you doing, my friend?
What's going on, guys? I was thinking about it. I used to do TV with Seth back in the day, and now I get to do radio with Ike. So happy to be on and talk to both you guys at the same time.
Awesome.
ESP.
Well, listen, man. Let's jump into my Philadelphia Eagles, our Philadelphia Eagles. The last couple of weeks, I've been broadening the spectrum of the show to talk about everything NFL, and some of the listeners got mad at me. A couple of guys, hey, this is supposed to be an Eagles show. Today, you guys are getting nothing but Eagles. So now let's jump into it because I haven't talked to either one of you guys since, the end of the season. Massive changes for the Philadelphia Eagles. One, Doug Peterson, head coach, Super Bowl winning coach, is out. Nick Sirianni is now the new head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. And I don't think anybody ever thought or ever believed, over the last 5-year period, that one Carson James Wentz would be traded from the Philadelphia Eagles. And I talk about these massive changes because there's still a lot swirling around this football team and where this football team is heading. Give me your thoughts as to, how the season ended and where the Philadelphia Eagles are now after these massive changes.
Well, I mean, I think we can all agree that the 2020 season was really the worst case scenario for the Eagles. Even I, who can look at a floor of a team versus the ceiling for a team, this team in 2020 went beneath what I thought they would do as a football team. You knew it would be difficult coming off the off season that everybody had during the pandemic. The unfamiliarity of the changes around the team. And they never seemed like they were ever cohesive as a team. And whether that was one unit playing well in all 3 phases of the game or playing complementary football as an entire team. And I don't know how much of the offseason and the way it played out affected this football team. I do know this. When you look at a number of key players, a lot of them probably, you can make the argument, had their worst season, especially over the last 3 or 4 years. There are very few players on this team that lived up to expectations, and even fewer that surpassed expectations. So I would say it's a culmination of things. And then you throw in the coaching, especially on the offensive side of the football, where there were new assistant coaches brought in that you thought would be there to help sort of expand the offense and get some versatility, some things that you thought would play to Carson's strength. I don't think those things took hold like everyone anticipated them taking hold. And I think even Doug trying to manage and coach this entire situation almost from afar, he just didn't have the same impact as a coach as he had in years past. And let's be honest, let's get back down to the most important part of the team, not playing to the level most of us expected him to play, and that's the quarterback. When the most important part of the team, and really arguably your best player on the team, is playing below his expectations and our expectations, you're going to have a difficult time meeting expectations overall. So having all these things really come together in this one season, it led to a 4-11-1 season. And I can understand if the team, I don't know, played at 8-8, 9-7, maybe even 7-9, and they were competitive in a lot of those games. You're talking about a team that either beat themselves or just lacked any type of continuity at times out there. And it resulted, to me, in the worst the Eagles football since I've seen since Andy Reid's last year. Andy's last year, that was probably the worst brand of Eagles football I've seen.
Elliot.
Yeah, look, I think the perfect word is expectations, right? Ike talked about expectations. At the beginning of the year, we all make predictions of what they're going to be. Fans think what they're going to be. The Eagles have also internal expectations. And I think fans would be kind of surprised how internally realistic they can be a lot of years. Like in 2016 and 2017, they knew what they would be. They ended up being wrong because in 2017, they won the Super Bowl. They were much better than expected. But I think even the Eagles would tell you that prior to the 2020 season, they expected to be a playoff team. Coming off of 2019, with COVID going on, Howie Roseman has talked about how the COVID situation kind of made them reinvest in the team and sign some players they might not have otherwise. So for that to happen last year was a complete failure at every level of the organization, the front office, the head coach, and yes, the quarterback. Now, I would place the most blame on the quarterback just because I don't think you can really judge any aspect of the team when you have a quarterback playing that poorly. It's like when the engine of your car is not working, you can't even really judge anything else about the car because the main thing is messing everything up. So, look, I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about Carson. I'm sure with the LTBB, president here, but the organization itself, I think, as painful as that was, and when you look at the record, like in 10 years, 15 years, when people look back, they'll see 4-11-1, and they'll be like, that must have been a bad year. They were worse than that 4-11-1. Like, it was ugly to watch that team. So it was a disaster of a football season, but I think in some ways it was needed. I think when you look at 2018 and 2019, they were a playoff team. They were better than 4-11-1, but they were a flawed team. They were an old team trying to hang on to what helped them win in 2017. As much as I think Doug probably shouldn't have been fired, I don't think he was the main reason they were a bad team. The offense was bad the last few years, and Doug is hired to make the offense good and to make the quarterback improve. And neither of those things happened. You know, as much as you want to blame him, that's what he's there for. So I think that as painful as it was and as unexpected as it was, I think it was needed. And I think that the team is in some ways better off because I think they made changes they would not have otherwise had they gone 7-9, 8-8, and, won a bad division.
Well, let's stay right here and let's segue into, Carson, because, I think that this situation with Carson has been probably the most polarizing situation that I can remember, since Randall coming in playing on third downs my rookie year. Jaws taking first and second down, Randall coming in on third down. And then, the drafting of Donovan McNabb and the city of Philadelphia not liking that pick at all. This situation with Carson Wentz, I think that, I think the city wanted Carson to be successful. They really, really, really wanted him to be successful. And for whatever reason, you're talking about a massive regression. And, then we can talk about the injuries. They play a part of it. We can talk about probably the lack of talent, at the skill positions. All of those things, play a massive role in a quarterback's success. But I think you also have to take into consideration Carson's play himself. And as I watched him, it's crazy because, after the third game of the season, we're doing post game. And I looked at Ray and Barrett and Michael. I said, we got a quarterback problem. And they looked at me like I was crazy, but I could just see that something was amiss. Something was off with Carson, and that there was going to be problems down the road that were going to be insurmountable for him. And they just kept mounting and mounting. Now there are what I call them, the Wentz apologists, that no matter what happens, they're going to ride with Wentz. And it's everybody else's fault but Carson Wentz's. And then there are people at the other end of the spectrum that were like, oh, he was never really that good. He's been hurt all of these years. If you go back and you look at his overall record, he's right around 500. And I know that most people say you don't measure quarterbacks by wins and losses. My question is, what other measurement do you measure a team and a head coach and a quarterback by other than the wins? But as I watched him play, I'm wondering, I'm like, what happened to the confidence that this guy once had? What happened to, the level of ease that he played the game with? It just looked like he was uncomfortable from the word go. And many people will say, well, how we made him uncomfortable by drafting Jalen Hurts in the second round with the 53rd overall pick. Now, you and I know as competitors, it's all about the competition. It's all about, the competition.
Not at that position. Not at that position, Seth.
Okay. But
not at that position.
I get it. I get it. Okay. I just, coaches talk about not having prima donnas on your team. We have ushered ourselves into an era where the quarterback is now a major prima donna on the team because everybody must prove week in, week out, year after year, okay, through competition that they belong on the field, except for the quarterback, Yeah. And in my opinion, I think that that's wrong. I think it's wrong because, the cream always rises to the top via competition, okay? Mm-hmm. If there's been so many reports about Carson and him wanting to get out of here and him making up his mind a long time ago. And my thing is, you can't run from competition because you got to face it 16, now 17 times every single week, So I look at a guy like, Aaron Rodgers, bring it on. I look at guys, who have been thrust in the same position many, many times. Tom Brady with Jimmy Garoppolo. Bring it on. Okay. So my question is,
Tom Brady didn't like that.
Say that again.
Tom Brady did not like Jimmy Garoppolo being there.
Well, it's not so much about what you like because life ain't fair. It's about you traded. It's about listen. They were thrust in a position, where they had to make that trade because they were in a position where they weren't going to pay Tom Brady, $18-19 million and Jimmy Garoppolo $18 million. So that move had to be made. But my thing was Tom upped his game. In that 4 years that Jimmy Garoppolo was there, he won 2 Super Bowls. He was like, he's going to sit right over there on the pine. I know you drafted him to be my heir apparent. So my question is for Carson Wentz, why wouldn't he embrace that? Why wouldn't he embrace, the competition of it all and just say, you know what, this is my team, this is my deal, and I'm not relegating myself to the bench for no one. I'm going to fight through it, and it's going to be mine. And for a lot of people, it looks like he took the easy way out.
And I see why people would feel that way. And I think there's a fair argument there to say he did run from the competition. I don't think anybody would be wrong for saying that. Seth, you and I come from different cloths, right? Like, we play a position where it's all about fighting for your job and not giving in to your competitor as a linebacker. I don't like that quarterbacks are like this. I just have accepted the fact That's the way that they are. And we as fans, we want competition at the quarterback position when we don't like the guy who's in there playing quarterback. Like, we don't want competition if we like the quarterback. Like, nobody is saying the Eagles should go out and bring competition in for Jalen Hurts right now.
I am.
Yeah, but
you're a fair-minded person. I'm just saying most fans, and even Jeffrey Lurie, if you believe the reports out there, they want to make this thing clear, and because I think they recognize, whether you want to say Carson was soft or he didn't step up to the plate, they at least recognize that may have had an impact on their starting quarterback. And so they don't want to make that mistake again by putting the guy who presumably is in the place of being a guy in the locker room. You brought up something, Seth, and I don't want to forget it real quick. You brought up something about Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. The difference between those guys are obviously plenty of them, but I think the main thing is, they were older and proven guys. Wentz has been fighting for his locker room since he tore his ACL in Los Angeles. Nick Foles went on that run. This hasn't been Carson Wentz's locker room since he got injured in Los Angeles. So he's been fighting to make this his locker room without any question, meaning that you're not putting somebody behind him that's a threat to either his position or his standing within the locker room. And right or wrong, I believe that did play a part on his psyche. I just do. I believe it played a part on his psyche.
And that's the thing, too, I think can't be stressed enough. Like, Carson went through Nick Foles. Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers did not. Like, that was a traumatic event, whether you want to call him soft for it, whatever, however you want to call it. That was a traumatic event for Carson. He went from, I mean, think about how he views that Super Bowl ring. He probably looks at it as in his house and doesn't even appreciate it because of everything he's gone through, right?
So I guarantee you he hasn't worn it.
There's no shot. I bet he likes that NFC title hat more than he likes that Super Bowl, right? So if you're Carson and you just went through that and you just got over it, like, because Ike is right. He had to win that locker room back, and he didn't even completely win it back in 2019. But to go from, think about where we were saying a year ago with this team. A year ago, right now, we would sit and say with Carson, he won the team back. He carried them back to the playoffs. He had a great 4-game stretch. And so for them to draft Jalen Hurts, it's like putting somebody through a car accident again. Like, yeah, if you've been through a car accident, you're going to be a little more scared driver than someone that hasn't. And obviously the difference between Carson, Aaron Rodgers, and Tom Brady, as Ike said, are many. But when you talk about this exact specific situation, I don't blame Carson for feeling that way. And I also think with Carson, like, it doesn't have to become a personal thing. Like, we've seen Carson navigate this city pretty flawlessly for almost, 4 years, up until last year. Locker room aside, he never had any media issues. No one ever called him soft. He came back from an ACL, a broken back, all that stuff. Carson's issue is he suffered 2 major injuries, and he's just not as good as he used to be. And because of that, that's the reason he's gone. Now, from asking to leave, look, you can call it whatever you want. I call it smart. He only gets one career. It wasn't going to happen here in Philadelphia. He gets to go to Indianapolis. Why does he care if people in Philly don't like him? Now he's in Indianapolis, which is a better situation. He has a better chance at his career advancing, and everything that happens in Philly will be in the rearview mirror if he's good in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
You say if. My issue is, okay, see, when I think about, I was around for 5 years, one of the greatest talent evaluators, in my opinion, in the history of the NFL, Buddy Ryan. Buddy could look at a guy and tell you whether he could play or not, okay? And there was a process of evaluating players. And I think that is something when you think about, how players are evaluated today. Everyone wants to know what they run the 40 in, and everyone wants to know how high they can vertical jump and their broad jump. They want all the metrics. They will look at highlight film rather than the entire body of work, to determine whether they like a player or not. Okay. For me, there's a psychological and a mental side to the game of football, and the problem is they have no metric to measure heart. They have no metric to measure mental toughness. And this is where a lot of these, so-called football gurus and GMs get themselves in trouble.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
My thing is, I think that Carson Wentz, listen, no one's ever going to question his toughness. The guy rushed for a touchdown with a torn ACL. Okay. So nobody's ever going to question. I mean, he got beat up for 50 sacks this year in 12 games. Nobody's going to question his toughness. Okay. What's debatable is his mental toughness. Okay. And that, more than anything, is to me one of the most important elements of a quarterback or a player, period. Okay. How do you deal with adversity? How do you deal with situations when things aren't going well? Things just seemed to snowball for him this year in a situation, and he could never get out in front of it, and squat down and stop the downhill spiral. So when you talk about the mental toughness, and listen, I'm for a quarterback competition. You want to know why? Because Jalen Hurts is built for that. Okay. Carson Wentz wasn't built for that. And to me, that's where, Howie Roseman and Doug Peterson, if you will, and Frank Wright and Jeffrey Lurie, that's where they dropped the ball. They missed the fact that, this guy is okay when things are rolling. I mean, look he won a national championship, in college.
Yeah.
I mean, they hardly ever lost a game. So he never had to go through any adversity. And when the adversity finally hit him, and I'm not talking about the physical adversity, I'm talking about the mental adversity. Things just went sideways for him, and he wasn't able to come back.
But where I disagree, real quick, where I disagree is you talked about the evaluation of like the draft process, right? The evaluation on Carson was correct. Carson was really good in 2016 and 2017. Carson was mentally tough. How we're talking about Jalen now is how we talked about Carson in 2016 and 2017. Carson came broken. Like he came to Philly a product able to handle the city, able to handle all this stuff. He became broken because of what he went through. Now, you could argue he should have been tougher through those circumstances, but I just think that the circumstances were so unique. Like, so little players have gone through what he went through. You can point to different players around the league and say he was able to overcome an ACL, or, he got benched and came back. But like, it's just so different for Carson to me. Now, I do think Jalen, having been to Alabama, Oklahoma, all that stuff, is more ready for this city. But I don't think the evaluation of Carson was wrong. I just think he went through the perfect storm nobody could have seen.
Well, listen, hold up. I'm going to give it to you in a second. Elliot, I'm not talking about his evaluation from a talent standpoint, okay?
Right.
Because, the thing about the process of evaluating players that's flawed to me is how you look at the circumstances and how you look at the situation. Listen, these players have learned how to game the system. They know how to go to Indianapolis and what to do there, and how to up their draft stock. They understand how to do that. Okay. But what you can't measure is what's right here. You can't.
Right.
You can't measure what's up here. You can't measure how a player is going to react and whether he eats, sleeps, drinks, and dreams football or not. Because there's a segment of players that play for the notoriety. There's a segment of players that play for the money. And there's a segment of players that play to be champions. And it's hard to find 53 guys, let alone a quarterback, who is built with just championship pedigree. Okay. So when things get tough, I'm not talking about his physical talent. I'm not talking about his physical evaluation. I'm saying that, listen, Jalen Hurts has been through some things. What do we know that Carson Wentz has actually been through? And I'm not saying that that's a prerequisite to be a quarterback, but if you haven't dealt with tough situations, when the going gets tough, how do you deal with them?
Well, here's the other thing.
All right, go ahead.
No, well, here's the other thing. And circumstances, playing in Philadelphia, right? So everybody can't necessarily handle that when the heat is turned up on you.
I agree.
And you need to play better. We've seen plenty of star athletes come through this town that they don't necessarily live up to expectations, and the heat gets turned up a little bit more, and their play doesn't get turned up more, it gets turned down. And then it becomes, the only thing I'll say that we didn't see with Carson, and maybe it's because they wound up trading this offseason. Elliott mentioned it earlier. He never got into a back and forth with the media. He never got into a back and forth with fans on social media. We've seen athletes in this town can't handle the pressure, and the next thing you know, they're having back and forth with the media or the fans. So I'll hold reservations before I'll say Jalen Hurts is built to play in Philadelphia, because being the backup is completely different than being the starter.
I get
Once
it.
you become Nick Foles was different as the backup than he was as the starter at the beginning of the season for the Eagles. So, and I'm not, that's not to blame the fans. That's just to say, to play in Philadelphia, you would better be able to, as a star player, take criticism when it happens and be able to rise to the occasion. I don't think that Carson wasn't built to play in Philadelphia. I actually think he was built to play in Philadelphia. What he wasn't built for was to handle the other circumstances surrounding this, to be able to come back from it. Take a minute, Seth and Elliot, and think about this. It's one thing to block out the noise from the outside. Block out the noise from the inside. How do you walk around the building when there are players anonymously putting out stories on you? Right? So, I can imagine this dude probably feels uncomfortable walking in his locker room because he doesn't know who to trust, who to befriend, how to be a friend. These are, and I'm not saying he doesn't play a part in the relationships being strained in the locker room. All I'm saying is that there were circumstances there that he had to overcome to win over his teammates in the locker room. And that starts with, are you more affable? Are you more approachable than Nick Foles? Man, we like having that guy around here. That was a good teammate to be around, to be in the locker room with. We enjoyed playing with him, right? So, and trying to, you know how this is, trying to win over the loyalty and the trust of people that it matters the most to you, and not being able to do that can be frustrating, right? It can be frustrating.
The thing that I hope that Carson, that he learned the most coming off of that knee injury, I was hoping that he sat back and observed and looked at how Nick Foles purported himself in that locker room, in the city, in front of the media, and with his teammates, okay? I hope that he's watching this and that he tears a page out of Nick Foles' book, because we knew that Nick Foles was on his way out, okay? So I'm like, okay, I hope he learns. And I hope he takes all of that information and applies it when Nick Foles is gone. And it seems like he didn't, And before I pass to you, Elliot, I thought it was interesting what Jason Peters said this week. He said, Carson's a great player. He said, but if you're not doing what you need to do, Philly will eat you up. Okay. Now, it wasn't that Carson didn't know that. Carson, he had seen the good side.
Right.
He had watched the process and watched how the media and the fans tore into the process, during those early years. So he knew he could see what was going on over at Citizens Bank. He could see what was going on right there, in the Wells Fargo Center with the Flyers. So he knew what was going on, but he didn't make the requisite changes to how he did things, endearing yourself to your teammates, hanging out, being one of the guys, and all those types of things that makes guys want to follow you.
You know what it was? Real quick, Elliot, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
You know what it was? I think it was, because I know we got Eagles fans watching this, and I don't want them to think that I'm saying Eagles fans drove Carson Wentz out. That's not what I'm saying. That couldn't be further from the truth. I think he was built to handle that. It was the internal relationships and the strained relationships that he couldn't figure out how to fix and bring closer, whether it's a personality disconnect or what have you. Hopefully, for his sake, you better know this ain't Fargo, North Dakota. This is the NFL. For his sake, you only get one more shot at this. If you don't make the appropriate adjustments and corrections to how to endear yourself to your teammates in the locker room in Indianapolis, the same thing will happen eventually. The same thing will happen. So it's not about Philadelphia and going to Indianapolis in a smaller market. No, it's that locker room. If he doesn't fix what the issues were in that locker room, he's going to have the same issues there. And to me, that, along with being coachable, is really what has played a huge part in his regression as a player. The talent is there. No doubt in my mind, the talent is there. But if you don't accept coaching and you don't accept your flaws and work on them and fix them, you're never going to be the player that realizes his potential. And if you can't mend fences and be a guy that brings your teammates together, and Brian Westbrook said this, I got this from him, and you can't be a guy that your teammates gravitate to, they're running to get away from you, you're never going to survive at that position, because the quarterback position requires you to bring everybody in, to include everybody. You're already viewed as a prima donna. You're already viewed as being overpaid. So you have to go above and beyond to make sure your locker room knows that you're just one of the guys. That's what makes Tom Brady great. He's just one of the guys. But he was a 6th-round draft pick, so he's humble. Even with his greatness, he's never lost sight of how hard he had to work to get to where he's at, and he's always viewed himself as one of the guys. He's always viewed himself as one of the guys. Go ahead.
That's why you need competition. That's why you need competition at that position. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so like Ike is dead on, right? And I remember that quote from Westbrook. I think it was a few weeks ago when he said that, and that's true. But to me, if you don't have that, then you have to be really, really good. And in 2017, like Carson was the same dude in 2017 he was in 2018. The difference was once they won without him, and then they won without him again in 2018, they're looking at him and they're going, all right, well, we've won without you. We won without you again in 2018. Like players see him playing poorly. If you're on the offensive line and you're like, I'm giving up all these sacks because you're holding on to the ball too long, that's when it matters if guys like you or not. Because if you're helping them, like if you're making the tackles look better, if you're having Ertz catch all these balls, if you're making the receivers better, you're earning them money, you're helping their career. They don't care how cool you are or not. I mean, you guys could speak to this more.
That's true. No, you're right. You're right.
Like if when Carson had the team at 11-2 and they were a primetime football and everyone was playing well, yeah, they like Carson. But when Foles went in and won without him, and then Carson wasn't doing the stuff to make sure everybody liked him personally. And I think he probably had a chip on his shoulder too, because they won that Super Bowl and he didn't. Like, let's keep it real. Like he in 2018 needed that Super Bowl more than anybody else on that roster did. So I think what happened was, yes, there were personal issues, but when Carson didn't have the team's back and then he had his legs cut out from under him by them winning without him, that made it even more difficult for him to then win that locker room back, because they had visual evidence of them being better without him. And it kills his chances of winning, especially when, let's be honest too, he's just not naturally that guy. Like Carson's not a bad guy. He's not a mean person. He's just not the guy everybody gravitates to. Like Jalen Hurts is more of just that guy. It doesn't mean Jalen will succeed. We'll see what happens and what Jalen has to go through. But at least like you saw last year, they were 1-3. But players at least gravitated towards Jalen because they liked him personally. And with Carson, when he wasn't helping them win and he wasn't their boy, like that's when you can't come back from that. You have to be one or the other. And he just wasn't either towards the end.
Listen, I agree with both of you guys. I've been in locker rooms, that was strained before. What I do know is the locker room is going to follow the guy that gives you a chance to win. If you win it, if you win it, I don't care who the quarterback is, they're going to follow you. It's not until things start to go sideways that players that the locker room begins to get fractured. With that being said, let's fast forward to, the quarterback who has been earmarked, the quarterback. Ike, you touched on it early. Jeffrey Lurie has mandated Howie and his staff to do everything that they can to build around Jalen Hurts for this year. He's going to be the number one guy. They'll probably bring in, a veteran, but there's not going to be, any competition. He's going to be the guy they want to see. They want to find out, what they have in this guy. And to be honest with you, a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people want them to draft a quarterback at number 6. But my thing is, Jeffrey's already mandated. He said, we're building for the long term. We're going to try to win Super Bowls by doing things over the long term rather than these short-term fixes where you go through these 4 to 5 year windows. You got to tear it down, build it back up, tear it down, build it back up. 2, 3, 4, 5 years is what he said. That just sticks in my mind. Mm-hmm. So to me, this is the smart thing to do, and just like with Carson, there a lot of people in the fan base, they love Jalen Hurts. They want to see what he can be. A lot of people don't think he can play at all. I mean, I got into it with a guy on Twitter today over this. He can't throw the ball. He just run. I went on Google and pulled up his stats and threw him up there at him. I'm like, come on, man, look at the numbers. At least do some research before you start running your mouth. It's best to be silent and be thought stupid than to, open your mouth and remove all doubt. But
that's Twitter for you. That's Twitter for you.
I get it.
I was gonna say you arguing with somebody on Twitter is not surprising to me.
So I'm I got competition down here. We already kind of talked about that, and we talked about the why. But obviously, Jeffrey Lurie sees something in this kid and wants to make him the number 1 guy. And through the rebuilding process, in my opinion, this is how you do it. You don't go out and draft a quarterback and then try to fix everything else. You fix everything else, particularly you get your line set, and then you want to get him some weapons, and then you want him to step in. You don't do it the other way around and get him so beat up and rattled and shook up that by the time he gets all of those pieces, right, he's mentally just wore out. But this is the situation that they find themselves in. And if they can keep this offensive line healthy and we can get Miles Sanders, the type of touches that he should get and get some solid coaching for these wide receivers, this team's got a chance offensively, to be somewhat competitive, especially in the division.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I agree. It's all that's going to depend on, how much Jalen Hurts grows in his second season. Obviously, he didn't get a full rookie season. He only had 4 games, didn't have a preseason. So technically, he hasn't even played 16 games yet. So we got to be fair to him and give him an opportunity to grow. But I'm with you, Seth. I think Jeffrey Lurie has this thing right. If they stick to this plan, and this is not a smoke screen, you don't need to take a quarterback, particularly at number 6 in the first round. You want to take one later in the draft to develop in the 4th or 5th round, okay, that's fine. But Jalen Hurts needs to get the full support of this team and the draft picks to put the weapons around him to at least give him a fair shot at showing you either he's the guy or he's not the guy. I mean, but going in this thing halfway and trying to create some competition to see if it makes him play better, I've never been in favor of that. The only time you do that is if you're not sure about somebody. You took Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round, so you're pretty sure about him. You're not absolutely sure about him, but you're pretty close if you took him in the 2nd round. Give him an opportunity to go out there and show you what he can do this year. Don't go and by the way, call complimentary football for Jalen Hurts, right? I don't need to see Jalen Hurts throw the ball 45 times a game to prove that you made the right decision in going with Jalen Hurts. Play smart complimentary football, and let's see what this kid can do. I'm actually starting to get excited about what the potential can be. They're sitting in a nice position. I want to see what they do with that 6th pick. They almost can't go wrong with whatever they do. I mean, the player can turn out to be not a good player, but whoever they take there will be a guy that's a top 10 player. Like whoever they take there, unless they decide to trade back. So you're going to get a good football player. I want to see what they can do moving forward with Jalen Hurts. We talked about this earlier, fellas. As much as I like Carson Wentz as a player, and will root for him in Indy, he's an Indy. I'm an Eagle. Jalen Hurts is my starting quarterback. I want to see what the Eagles can do to get the best out of Jalen Hurts so that he can be what's best for our football team. All this other stuff is for debates and talk shows. We're Eagles fans. We should want what's best for the Eagles.
And the thing is, there's been a lot of talk about, well, Jalen can handle it and Carson couldn't. Like, maybe, but I hope I never find out if Jalen can handle it. I don't want to put Jalen through what Carson went through. Like, why would I ever want to put Jalen through some emotional litmus test just to see if he can handle a backup? Like, maybe one day in his career he'll have to handle it, but I'm not going to put him in that situation willingly. Now, if you tell me someone you evaluated number 6, like if they think Justin Fields is considerably better than Jalen Hurts, then I have a hard time telling them not to draft him. I don't know if I believe that, but if that's what they believe, fine. But when I look at the draft, I say Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, those are the guys that are going to be the best player on the board. Like Trey Lance is a project. Justin Fields, I think, is a project too. I like Justin Fields, but people would argue he's a bit of a project. So I just don't see a rush to jump into a serious relationship with another quarterback. Like if you take that guy number 6, you're committing at least 3 years to him. Like you're not trading that guy after 2 years if you draft him at number 6. So with Jalen, you give him a year, you see if he can do it. Trading Jalen Hurts in a year is a lot different than trading Justin Fields would be. Like you're not doing that. So I can take a guy number 6 that I think is an elite level player that will help Jalen, right? And then in a year, if Jalen's not the guy, then you move on. But the other part of this too, and he's really flying under the radar, is like Nick Sirianni has to be a good head coach. Like we can talk about Jalen and all this stuff. If Sirianni's a disaster, none of this is going to matter. So
that's true.
The biggest thing with the Eagles next year is Nick Sirianni. Like he is the one who's going to decide how good this team is, not Jalen. Jalen will certainly help. And if he's special, he can cover up some of Sirianni's weaknesses. But we have, like, as optimistic as I can be about the Eagles, and I agree with you, like, I think fans should be excited. Like this team was not fun the last 2 years. They were boring. They were bad. Like I think they'll be more exciting to root for. But Sirianni has to be good. Like that's the worry with the team is Nick Sirianni.
Well, I guess my big question is, they got the number 6 overall pick. I'm more of the opinion, and I'll throw this out. We've heard everything from, drafting a quarterback. I think Jeffrey Lurie has pretty much squashed that. A wide receiver at 6, Pitts at 6. For me, I look at them on both sides of the ball and I see too many glaring holes. The question is, is one player that you can pick at number 6 going to make that much of a difference when you're trying to build over the next 2 to 5 years? So what do you do? See, in my opinion, you trade back, you get multiple picks, do what you got to do, and you build. And all. Listen, honestly,
how far are you looking to trade back? How far are you gonna go back?
I don't think you can go back any further than 10 to 12. Because you still want to be able to get a quality guy. And then that all depends, because if somebody wants to give you this year's and next year's to be able to move up in your spot, then I'm moving all the way back. Because guess what that does? That gives me 3 next year. Because the only way they're not getting that pick, the number 1 out of Indy, is either Carson gets hurt or you get a repeat of what we saw this year, and for some crazy reason he gets sat down. But we're getting that number 1 pick from the Colts next year. Okay, so my thing is, if your intent is to build, then one player in the 2021 draft doesn't make your team that much better. Okay, there's great players that are coming out every single year, and we know by percentage wise, what is it, 20, maybe 25% of the players drafted in the first round ever reach the potential, unless you're talking about a quarterback that you take in the top 5, top 10, now that's a different scenario, because that's that guy that you have to have. But I say you trade back and get as many picks as you can so that you can, and I get what everybody's saying. I'm pretty sure my chat line is about to blow up in a minute. Well, the guy that's making the picks, I get it, but they need too many pieces, and they need too much depth across the board to stay at 6, in my opinion.
I mean, the guy that's making the picks, the last time he drafted inside the top 10, it was Lane Johnson and Carson Wentz. So the time he drafted between 10 and 15, it was Derek Barnett. So like, I understand trading back. On a macro sense, I agree with the blueprint of that. But man, this team, they need somebody that in that first pick that's going to be a Pro Bowl, all pro talent. And you're just have a better chance of getting that guy at 6 than you do at 12. And I love the idea of 3 first-round picks. I get all that. I'm starting to talk myself into Jalen Waddle. Like, I get it. But man, if you trade back to 12 and you don't hit that pick, and like Jamar Chase is good, Kyle Pitts is good, Patrick Surtain is good, I would rather just take my guy at 6 and pray that dude is good than try to get cute. And I get it. Like, I get it. But I would, if I was making it, I would be too nervous to trade back.
Okay, so let me give you this scenario. Do you know over the last 10 years, the Eagles have drafted 11 wide receivers? I think 2 or 3 of them in the first round, and at least 2 of them in the second round.
Yeah.
How many doggone wide receivers can you draft, man?
I agree, but if Jamar Chase is there at 6, I don't know. It would be hard to pass on him.
I tell you, Seth, I'm with you. I say that all the time. I'm like, the Eagles have drafted 20 receivers in the last 3 years. How many receivers are we going to take? But I'm telling you, if you're the Eagles, the safest thing would be is to take Kyle Pitts or Jamar Chase.
Yeah,
if he's there.
absolutely.
Because at least the fan base can say they took the guy that we wanted. They can't be mad at him if they take the guy that everybody wanted. Meanwhile, I'm over here like, I'm hoping Penei Sewell drop to us, or Rashawn Slater becomes an even better player because he's playing in a much better conference in the Pac-12. You know, Sewell, I don't know what type of defensive ends he's blocking out there in the Pac-12, but I know in the Big Ten, Slater, he had to go up against Chase Young. Yep. He had to go against Quiddy Pitty. He's had to go against other players. I mean, even a guy like Michael Parsons, Slater's had to find a way to block out there in the Big Ten. So, listen, I don't like our offensive line right now. There's a lot of question marks there. There are reports out there the Eagles are thinking about trading Brandon Brooks.
Don't do it.
Exactly. So, I don't know. I'm receivers and Kyle Pitts are the exciting pick to talk about. But I think the safe pick is going in the trenches, Seth, or either going in corner. Patrick Surtain is the guy I want. I want Patrick Surtain, but I think 6 might be too high to take him.
I agree. I mean, look, ask Andre Dillard how good those defensive ends out there he's covering are.
Exactly.
Right? Like, he just drafted that dude from there. So I'm not taking the guy from Oregon. I'll tell you that right now. Even if he falls to me at 6, I'll take my chance with my Lada, honestly, as much as I'll take it.
Well, but that's another thing to debate. What are they going to do? You just drafted this kid. What was it, 9? 2 years ago.
Dillard was the one.
Dillard was like 23. So.
Oh, okay.
Was he?
Okay, I'm thinking
20s.
So I mean, you just drafted this kid in the first round. You mean to tell me you're going to let him sit over there and play the project? You know how we ain't going for that, man. He's not going for that. I guarantee you. Listen, I guarantee you this. Hey, listen, I guarantee you this. I guarantee you there'll be a competition over there at that spot.
Oh, yes, there will. Or not a fair competition because Dillard's going to be handed the job. It'll be one of the two.
Man, I'm not going to even go there on Andre Dillard right now. I'm not going to even go there. I'm not going to go there.
Listen, man, I brought you over here to go there, Ike.
Listen, what I want to say is, I've said this on the show, like the Eagles are to force Andre Dillard to be in a cage match before they let him put on a uniform.
I was going to say.
Get on the practice field. Don't even let him put on shoulder pads or anything. Put him in a cage match and let me just see if he's going to fight back. I don't even care who you put in there with him.
We spent the first 25 minutes talking about if Carson was soft. Maybe, only take a few minutes with Dillard. Like that's not.
Listen, so it goes back to my evaluation process. Okay, I seen the film on him. He got great feet. But I didn't see him mauling nobody. I didn't see him just, eating nobody, And if you got to feed a guy gunpowder, to get him going, that's not the guy that you draft, man. I just, see, listen, there's a certain attitude that a football player must possess, especially when you're talking about, offensive line, blocking tight ends, fullbacks, if you're going to implement one in your offense, defensive line, linebackers. If those guys ain't got no dog in them, man, if they're pure puppy, man, you don't need that on your roster, man. You can't draft that kind of player for your roster. And you have to have, the type of scouts and the type of evaluators that can look at that guy and see, listen, Jordan Mailata is a project, but what Jordan Mailata will do is he will fight you. Okay. Yeah. And if he gets his hands on you, he trying to beat you down. Okay.
Yes.
When Doug Peterson came in, he said that, I want road graders. He went and got one in Brandon Brooks. Okay. Mm-hmm. He had one in Jason Peters. He had one in Lane Johnson. He had one sometimes, when he's pulling in Jason Kelsey. Okay. Right. Since that time, they haven't been able to fulfill that mantra of going out. I mean, you drafted Andre Dillard when you telling us you going after road graders. He the roadkill. He ain't the road grader.
How many third and shorts did we fail because we couldn't run the ball between the tackles?
And what happened with Dillard was he fell to them, so they didn't do the homework on him. I think the first day Stoutland talked to him was either the night before the draft or the day of, where they thought he might fall. But talk about the evaluation process. That's another reason I don't want to trade back. Like, just tell me someone that's going to be there at 6, and I can do all my homework on him, and I can feel confident in him, and I'll just take him. Because if you draft back to 12, all of a sudden someone falls you didn't do your homework on, you talk yourself into it, and that's how Andre Dillard happens.
Well, listen, I found it very interesting, when Jeffrey talked about in his press conference, you can have your sights set on a guy, and all of a sudden somebody takes him, and then it kind of throws your whole thing. I'm like, wait a minute. The other thing is, Elliot, you just talked about it. They didn't necessarily do their homework on him. How can you not? I mean, what are you doing from the end of the season? What are your scouts doing that's out scouting these? You understand what I'm saying? And I can understand the sentiment of both of you guys. You take the obvious pick because that's the best player there. Okay. Howie hasn't done that. He went off the ranch and took Jalen Reagor last year. He went off the ranch, and took J-Jaw when we had all these other guys that were right there. So I can understand that sentiment, about why you would do it that way. But I just, listen, at the end of the day, as much as we've tried to change the game, as much as the NFL has tried to change the game via, the rules and everything else, the tenets of the game will never not be what they always were. Okay, whoever controls the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball is going to be the team that wins the game. Plain and simple. Whoever can run the ball is going to control the tempo of the game. Whoever can stop the run is going to win the game from a defensive perspective. Okay, so you can change as much as you want. You can try to make it all about the offense and big plays and whatnot. But if you look at Tom Brady and you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they didn't just win that game throwing the ball with Tom Brady. Tom Brady only threw for 200 yards. They ran the football. They were balanced. Man. And that's what they got to get back to. You couldn't run the ball last year because you had all of these second and third string guys who really weren't road graders, guys that were trying to figure it out, So why not go back to building the way that you're supposed to be building it? Instead of, just going off the ranch and saying, well, I thought this guy was going to be that. No, I can get what you're saying, but let's build the proper way. Now,
and it's the most underrated part of the Super Bowl team. They were the #1 rushing team in the league.
Yeah. Well, and also look at the flip side of the line, right? I mean, that defensive line that year was really good. What really hurts the Eagles this year is that there's not an elite pass rusher there, because if there was, with the quarterbacks and everything, you probably had a good chance.
Yeah.
And Howie would love to take one. But I mean, the one out of Miami might be the best one, but there's no one at 6 where you say he's a great fit. Like it really hurts the Eagles that there's no elite pass rusher, because you could always use one, them especially with Brandon Graham, Derek Barnett. Josh Sweat's okay, but you want an elite level guy there.
Can we go Michael Parsons? Seth? Let's get the linebacker, Seth.
You know how he ain't doing that, man. You ain't know it. He quit before he drafted linebacker #1. Come on, man. So
let's go get a playmaker on defense, man. Let's go get a playmaker.
Yeah, listen, they need some. They definitely.
If he didn't go to Penn State, I might be higher on him. But he went to Penn State, man.
Hey, listen, I'm high on him. You know, when I watch the kid play, he reminds me of Darius Leonard, man.
Yeah.
I mean, a guy that can run, a guy that makes plays all over the place. You know, that flashes, got great instincts. You know, the Eagles need a guy like that on defense. The problem is they don't value that position, you know, to that level. You know, listen, Jeffrey has pretty much said, hey, you know, I want an elite level offense. You can't win this league without elite level offense. You know, I get that, but how do you, you know, on what level do you create that? You know, is that just via passing? Because we just went through that situation and it blew up in your face. Mm-hmm. Okay, you've got to run the football. You know, the other thing I wanted to talk about is Jeffrey Lurie, you know, has inserted himself into the processes of where this team is right now in a way that we haven't seen. Not to say that he hasn't always been visible, not to say he hadn't always been there, okay? But early in the process, he stepped out. You know, early in the process, he made a decision, okay? And now we've got him, you know, making mandates for Howie and his staff about what to do. Is it a good thing? Is it a good thing that Jeffrey Lurie is stepping into the fray? Because in my opinion, we've watched Jerry Jones destroy, you know, a potentially good football team over the last 5 years by being too involved. Is it a good thing that Jeffrey is stepping into the fray a little more?
So I've had a chance to think about this, right? And Seth, I'm not going to necessarily say it's a good thing or a bad thing, but let me just throw this scenario out there to you guys, or paint this picture for you. You brought Jerry Jones. And Jerry Jones thought for a while, obviously he loved being a part of the process. He wanted to make picks. He wanted to play GM. That's what he wanted to do. And even when he was making bad picks, he couldn't get his son or any of the other people around him to back off until one year he was real close to taking Johnny Manziel. He really wanted to take Johnny Manziel. Everybody knew Jerry Jones loved Johnny Manziel and thought if he fell to him, he would take him. And I believe that was the year that Stephen Jones talked Jerry Jones out of taking Johnny Manziel. And I think they took Fredericks, right, the center, or either the guard.
Yep.
They took one of those guys who turned out to be an all-pro player. Right? We turned out to be an all-pro player. And I think Jerry learned from that point there that I can trust the people under me. So I bring that up to say, we don't want Jeffrey Lurie involved with picks or having say or sway. Then I would suggest Howie Roseman start hitting on picks. Mm-hmm. Because the moment you tell Jeffrey Lurie, no, we don't want to take this guy, we should take this guy. Well, that guy had better be a DK Metcalf, or that guy had better be Justin Jefferson. So part of the problem is I don't know if there's anybody there who has the cachet or the draft resume to be able to say something. So I guess people would want them to bring in somebody entirely new and just let them run their draft. Well, you would have to have somebody out there that you feel confident with. Now, could you have kept Joe Douglas? They decided to stick with Howie. Could you have kept Andrew Berry before he went to Cleveland? They decided to stick with Howie. You've lost some football guys in there, some guys that are good with making those selections. I just don't know. Where do you go right now? If I'm not saying Jeffrey being involved is good, but what I am saying is what's there has to show the owner that they know what they're doing and they're picking the right players. And I don't know when he got more involved, but we went through the drafts over the last, since like 2013. You go through the 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 drafts, you got about maybe 5 players. Mm-hmm. How many of those players have the Eagles extended of their own? The one thing you can say about the Cowboys is that they are extending their own players. They aren't going after free agents. They're extending guys they drafted. And typically that's what good organizations do that draft well. They extend their own players. Our players haven't even been good enough for us to extend. We've spent more money on free agents and older players than we have the young players that we drafted and developed, with the exception of Lane, Zach, and Carson. I can't think of anybody else as a young player they drafted that we gave some real money to. They extended Isaac Seumalo, but they gave him backup money to be a starter.
Right. Jalen Mills, maybe, but that was a 1-year deal.
Yeah, that's a 1-year deal. Yeah.
I think when it comes to Jeffrey, like if I was on a podcast talking about the Bengals or the Dolphins or some other team and you told me the owner was making picks, I'd be like, that's a recipe for disaster. Like, you don't want that. But if we have to look at the Eagles' specific situation, Jeffrey has been involved he's always been very hands-on. Like at the NovaCare, I mean, I know you're in Arizona now, but Ike, you're there. I was there prior to COVID. Like Jeffrey's car is in his spot most days. Like Jeffrey is in the NovaCare. So when I look at it, I say, do you want an owner making picks and stuff? No. But since 2000, the Eagles have the 6th most wins in the NFL. They got 14 playoff wins. They have a Super Bowl in the last 5 years. So I can't say the results are bad. Like for as much as I don't like the process, the results are what they are. And when I talk about Jeffrey, Howie, or Nick Sirianni, I know for sure Jeffrey Lurie is a good NFL owner. Like he knows what he's doing. I trust Jeffrey not to be Jerry Jones, not to be sitting there swooping in and making decisions. Like Jeffrey listens to people. He's in meetings. He hears all these things. And then maybe does he overstep his boundaries? Sometimes maybe. But besides 2020, the team's always pretty good. So the results kind of are what they are. So if like it gets 2-3 years of this, then you say, all right, Jeffrey, like, yeah, I guess you can't say much because he's the owner, but you pray that he backs off, right? but like the results are what they are. And as long as they're good, I can't really kill him too much for it.
Well, I mean, listen, it's pretty, subjective whether they're good or not. You can throw those numbers out all you want, but the fans in Philadelphia, Elliot, they're not buying that. They're happy with 2017.
You almost have to go after Andy Reid left. You almost have to go after Andy.
Well, they won a
left.
Super Bowl. They won a Super Bowl after Andy left, and they made the playoffs in the last.
I'm just talking about the draft picks and stuff. That's
yeah. Well, I get the draft stuff, but like the results on the field matter more than the draft. I think with fans, we become a little too obsessed with the draft. Like I get it. It matters for sure. But the Eagles are one of the best teams in the league with Jeffrey Lurie as the owner. Even as a terrible drafter, even if Howie's struggling as a drafter, his resume is better than most GMs. So it matters, but it's not the end-all be-all. They don't hand out banners for draft picks. Like the Eagles win division titles. They won the Super Bowl.
Talk to him, Elliot.
It matters more. It does.
Yeah,
Seth,
I mean,
they don't hand out banners for draft picks. Seth.
You can do that on
they might not hand them out, okay? But I tell you this, if think about how much better they would have been had he not missed on some of the picks that he missed on, okay? Yeah. And how much more dominant they would have been. Listen, the NFC East hasn't had a repeat division winner, and I don't know how long. Okay,
Eagles, 14 years.
Yeah, so we can talk about how good they've been and how dominant they've been. But the first thing that you talk about when you come into training camp is winning the division. Okay, if they were that great, they would have won back to back to back in the weakest division in all of football. Listen, the Giants and the Redskins have been below the cellar, okay, for the last 10 years, and the Eagles and the Cowboys, they just been going back and forth for how long? I mean, the Redskins jumped in there, 1 year and then faded to black. But, at the end of the day, and I'm not saying, listen, Jeffrey Lurie can do whatever he wants to. It's his team. I'm just saying I don't want to see the Philadelphians tread down the road that the Cowboys are going down. Because, to close out the show, listen, Jerry had to buckle under the pressure. They just signed Dak Prescott to a $160 million extension, all right? $66 million signing bonus. When he puts his name on the dotted line, 95 of that is guaranteed, and there's practically $126 million of it guaranteed. Okay, good move, bad move, no one will ever know. Okay, the question is going to be: did Jerry make a major mistake? Because he could have had this done 2 years ago. Then everybody's going to debate: is that worth it? Listen, you talk about wins and losses. Dak's 40-24 over his career. That's pretty darn. I mean, what is it, like 63% winning? But I sit back and I smile. I'm laughing on the inside because Jerry gonna figure out a way to mess it up. He gonna
no doubt.
He gonna figure out a way to screw it up. Okay, and how do you avoid being thrust into salary cap hell with this kind of contract? Because listen, your offensive line is deteriorating. You played your running back, you paid your wide receiver, you paid your quarterback now, and you got a high dollar linebacker on the other side of the ball. And I think the other linebacker may be coming up soon as well. Okay. Mm-hmm. So how are they going to navigate this thing? What are they going to do? So when I talk about things falling apart because Jerry he's thrusted himself too far into the fray and he won't step back, I only say that because I don't want to see the Philadelphia Eagles turn into that. Listen, I love Jeffrey Lurie as an owner. I think the guy wants to win. He'll do whatever is necessary, to win and succeed. But I think that he's in a position now that, I think that Howie is really, up against the wall right here. I think Howie's got 2 years to get it right, or that accountability thing that he talked about when he fired Chip Kelly now really comes into focus. Because if Howie don't get it right in the next 2 years, and this team is still, waddling around, if they fall into the basement and everybody else is up over them, Jeffrey's going to be forced to make a decision and do something different. Because listen, I listened to that entire press conference. I took 5 pages worth of notes when Jeffrey sat down and talked about the Eagles, okay, when he fired Doug Peterson. And he deflected every question. I thought the Philadelphia media did a phenomenal job of peppering him with why Doug Peterson and not Howie Roseman. And Jeffrey defended him at every turn. How long can he continue to defend him if he don't get it right soon?
Well, I mean, listen, I think you're right. I just don't know how you would be able to do that if this next group, this next regime of Eagles football isn't a success. In other words, if they're looking for another head coach in 2 years, another quarterback in 2 years, I don't know how Howie Roseman makes it to his fifth head coach. I don't see how that happens. And able to explain it to the fans here. So listen, this is a business where you don't typically get as many opportunities as Howie has been given. But I will say this in Howie's defense, and I think Howie has caught a lot of heat. He hasn't gone unscathed.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah,
he's here. He hasn't been fired, but he damn sure is not getting a pass. So he's caught a lot of heat, and I think he understands that he needs to do a better job. And they got an opportunity coming up. They got a lot of draft picks this year. You got 2 first-rounders as of right now. Next year, I mean, I believe I'm with you, Seth. I believe it'll be 2 first-rounders next year. And you got a ton of salary cap space that's going to be available to you in the 2022 offseason. So you can't say you don't have the resources from draft capital to salary cap space over the next 2 years to put this team in the position where you got to compete with the Dallas Cowboys. Because I believe the Dallas Cowboys have 2 years to win the Super Bowl. If they don't win the Super Bowl in 2 years, they're going to start cost-cutting players down there. And that could be playing with a bunch of rookies and second-year players down there. He won't have all that talent around him in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, look, you said we got to wrap up. But the last thing I would say is you mentioned how at the beginning of training camp every year, the goal is to win the division. I would just say when you look at the NFC East, I don't think any team has a brighter future than the Eagles because all those teams have shown they're a disaster waiting to happen. We can say whatever we want about the Eagles. They're not the Jaguars. They're not the Browns. They're not Washington. They're not the Giants. They find a way to rebound. And I think that for as bad as the drafting has been and all that stuff, Lurie and Howie have shown they know how to win football games over a stretch of time. They just have, like, as mad as people want to be about it. So I do think the future is bright with the Eagles. I don't see the doom and gloom that other people do with the franchise right now.
Listen, let me say this real quick, Seth. It's refreshing to hear you be positive about the Eagles Elliott.
Well, now that Carson's gone, you know.
Oh, yeah. Don't think I don't know that.
And now that Carson's gone, the main problem is gone.
Exactly. Yeah, now that Carson's gone, that's all I hear is positivity. That's all I hear is positivity. That's good to hear.
2021, baby. You know what it is. Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni, they'll do it.
Hey, listen, I would love for you to be right. I got no problem if I hope Jalen Hurts is a Pro Bowl quarterback. I got no problem with it. No problem.
I gotta tell you, I tell you this. He threw me a curveball because this pairing was strategic. you know that, right?
Yeah.
This was strategic, and he threw me a curveball.
Oh, so he's Mr. Positive now. He's Mr. Positive now.
That's okay. But I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna keep wearing my sunglasses for the next 2 years while he wearing them rosy shades because I'm from the Missouri state. I gotta see it, man. I gotta see it.
Yeah, that's one thing I know about Seth.
Arrow Jr. on Twitter. Like, this is what it is now. I'm Mr. Positive. But
okay. Listen, that's one thing about that dude. Seth don't care who the hell's playing quarterback. He all he sees is football, and he only knows how to analyze football one way, the right way. That's the one thing you don't get the straight truth from Seth.
It's true,
hey, man. I want the team to do well. I think a lot of people think I didn't like Carson. Listen, I like Carson. I thought he was a phenomenal quarterback. I just saw the holes and I saw, the problems, and, I just call it like I saw it. And there's a faction of people out there that don't like it, a faction of people that still don't like it.
Don't change.
I will be what I'm doing with Jalen Hurts is I'm giving him the opportunity. I'm giving him that 2-3 year window, even when Carson came back from the injury. Okay, I'm still gonna give this young kid that, because I see so many people killing him. I'm like, wait a minute, get a kid a chance. You're not even giving him a chance with all these naysayers. There's he ain't gonna do this and he can't throw the ball deep. He got a weak arm. We don't know what he can be. The guy didn't have OTAs last year. He had an abbreviated, training camp. He had no preseason, and he's trying to learn the offense on the fly and new terminology and what it is to be a pro. Give the kid a chance. But trust me, believe me, okay? By the time we get to week 10, week 11 next year, if he ain't doing what he need to do, he going to get couture just like everybody else, because that's what we're paid to do, is to analyze what we see, okay? And I'm not going to sugarcoat it for anybody. Listen, it is what it is,
Listen, I got to take responsibility for the negativity that you're seeing on social media that Elliott may get to Jalen Hurts. I need to apologize to Jalen Hurts, and he probably doesn't even know why. But the LTBB is strong. It is strong. And they are not easily swayed, man. They are not easily swayed. And as of right now, the LTBB, they're still a little hurt. There's still members that aren't necessarily over Carson not been here, but I am trying to move the movement forward. We are Eagles fans.
All right.
And Colts fans. We are also Colts fans. You see Peyton back there? You see Peyton Manning back there?
Looks like Carson next year.
Hey, Ike.
Never do that to Carson. That wouldn't be Carson.
Hey, Ike.
Carson.
You know what the LTBB gonna have to do?
What?
They gonna have to mount up just like Carson and ride on up out of here.
Oh man,
that's the show for the day, guys. Listen. I thank you guys for coming on with me today, man. The time just flew by. I always say after every show, our most valuable commodity is our time, and I appreciate you guys taking the last, hour and 13 minutes and sharing your time, your insights, with my viewers and with me. Hey, I enjoyed it. Look forward to having you guys come back. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you. Elliott, Shore Park.
Thanks for having us, man.
Ike Reese, thank you. That's our show for the day, people. We'll be back right here. We'll be back here next week. Next week, I got a special guest coming on. I got Andrew Brandt coming on. He used to be the GM for the Green Bay Packers. He wrote a very, very interesting article last week on the salary cap. I wanted to bring him on so he could break down the salary cap and tell us what's really going on with the salary cap and how it's going to affect the Philadelphia Eagles and the rest of the league. So make sure you tune in next week. We'll break all that down for you. As always, I say take care of each other and be good to each other. But most importantly, Love each other. I'll see you right back here next week on the Seth Joyner Show. Peace.